Okay. What do you mean when you talk of the grey list? What do you mean by the grey list?
So when a country is put on what we call the Financial Action Task Force grey list, it means that that country has undergone a mutual evaluation, or weaknesses have been identified within its anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism framework, and this country has agreed through a political commitment to work with the Financial Action Task Force to close those gaps. So in 2016, Uganda underwent a mutual evaluation, and significant deficiencies were identified in our anti-money laundering framework. And consequently, in February 2020, we were put on the Financial Action Task Force grey list. We were given an action plan for us to close the gaps that had been identified. And our action plan comprised of 22 items. Fortunately, by Feb this year, Uganda had addressed fully its action plan, and the Financial Action Task Force removed Uganda from its grey list.
Okay.
What we are now doing as a financial intelligence authority and broadly as government through the Ministry of Finance and other relevant MDAs is to make sure that Uganda does not go back to the grey list. And to do this, government has come up with what we call the post-FATF ICRG exit strategy. With this strategy, the strategy will make sure that as government we address all the outstanding deficiencies that we are aware of, resulting from the various assessments we have carried out, and also in line with the changes within the FATF standards, so that by the time we undergo another mutual evaluation in 2028, we do not have significant gaps to warrant another grade. So that's brief what the grade is.
What are some of the effects of the grey list, of being on the grey list?
Now, being on the grey list comes with significant consequences for the country. Being on the grey list comes with significant deficiencies for the country. One of them is the isolation from financial markets. Because the moment you hit the grey list, then other countries mark you as high risk. Countries send circulars to their financial institutions, informing them that this country has been placed on the grey list. Please subject transactions going to or originating from that country to enhanced due diligence. And that consequently has an effect on the turnaround for transactions out of Uganda, for example, at the time when we were on the grey list. But it also affects access to foreign credit. It affects the time how you interact with other markets globally, because you're considered high risk. The other is the reputational damage, because you're branded high risk, and that again has an effect on foreign direct investments and the cost of doing business overall. So countries do everything to avoid being on the grey list, because in addition to the reputational damage, the isolation from financial markets, the financial institutions within your country suffer when it comes to correspondent banking relationships. Most of our financial institutions here to transact require correspondent banking relationships. So the moment you're on the grey list, then the other banks in those other countries consider your financial institutions equally as high risk. And that has an impact in terms of the due diligence and that your financial institutions are subjected to when they are seeking correspondent banking relationships. And so that's why we are heavily focused on making sure that Uganda does not go back to another effective.
Do elections contribute to Uganda's being on the grey list?
No, not at all. Not at all. Our being on the grey list in 2020 to 2024 February was a result of a mutual evaluation conducted in 2015, 2016. That mutual evaluation identified weaknesses within our framework, anti-money laundering framework, and we were given a time to address some of them. By 2020, when we were placed on the grey list, we had made significant achievements, particularly on technical compliance, but there were weaknesses within our effectiveness. And so we were placed on the grey list, purely as the result of the findings of the mutual evaluation. It has nothing to do with elections. Yeah.
Okay. I will.
Under our Anti-Money Laundering Act, there is a requirement that anybody entering or exiting Uganda with certain million or more in cash or what we call bearer negotiable instruments, items that can easily be converted into cash, must declare that to the customs officer, who then in turn declares it with the Financial Intelligence Authority. The incense is to make it harder for criminals to move with money across borders. And it's a requirement globally and in line with the Financial Action Task Force standards that criminals should not move with money across borders in cash or in bearer negotiable instruments. And that's the requirement we're implementing. We want to strengthen this a bit more so that every time anybody enters through our borders, whether through the airport or through the manned border points, that declaration is made. And that constitutes the database that we use to generate financial intelligence.
When has this declaration been put in place?
It is already in place. What we're only doing is enhancement. So that at all points, whenever you enter Uganda, you find those forms and and you cannot pass unless you've declared.
Are you saying there was a laxity in enforcing it?
We have been doing a lot of sensitization. Building capacity, and putting the necessary requirements in place. I wouldn't call it laxity, but rather increasing awareness such that by the time we come into enforcing it fully, there is enough knowledge by travelers that this requirement is in place and they must comply to it.
Okay. Is government stippling NPOs?
No, there is the focus is really not to stifle non-profit organizations. We have been out several times as a Financial Intelligence Authority educating non-profit organizations on how to work with us to comply with the various requirements within the Anti-Money Laundering Act. And there has been positive feedback. I want to say, for example, that most of the non-profit organizations have now registered with us because it is a requirement that for them to obtain a permit now at the National Bureau for NGOs, they must have registered with us. And with this, it will give us better regulation and oversight of this over the sector. So we are working to smoothen that relationship and to better appreciate some of the measures and why we implement them. So our interest is not to stifle the operations of NPOs, but rather to build understanding of why we implement these measures and how we can work together to protect the sector from abuse by criminals.
Finally, may you give an example of what you called bearable items, those items that you think can be converted into money? You just talked about it.
Globally, criminals, other than physical cash, move with gold, for example. The criminals prefer gold. Why? Because it is small, can carry it in smaller quantities, yet highly valuable. And it is easy to move with. So one of them is gold. Another one, of course, is travelers' checks and many other things. So some of these are diamonds. Some of these items which you can easily convert into cash. There is a requirement under our law, and it is a practice globally. For those who have traveled across many other airports, you must declare that to the authorities. It is really part of understanding the source and the purpose of the money that you're carrying. So again, to make it clearer, Our interest is never in stopping you from having money. Our interest is in understanding the source and the purpose of the money that you're moving with.
Thank you.
We have even an interagency where FIA is part of them. Then we have a law. The most important thing is that there is a law in place. Three is that we are robust in investigations as and when they do what? When they occur. Somebody asked that are they only international? No, they're even local. They are local, although they are also prominent in cross-border arrangements. There is a very high likelihood you will find that big monies are either crossing from here to an outside country, or in the reverse gear, they are coming from an outside country and they are being wired through financial institutions. Now, there are also people who keep what we would call dirty money in their houses, in far away from financial institutions. That's why when one asks that, hey, are they common mainly with big people? Not necessarily. They can be even conducted by small people, because you see, it all depends on what role you play in this game. Sometimes the players are small people, but at times are also people of sizable influence in society. Uh, but what is most important for people to know is that we have many players in this. They can be legal firms, because sometimes you have come across situations where you find prominent lawyers are conduits in these offenses. They can be land dealers, because at times, they are what we call predicate offenses. So you find that the major offense conducts the money, then the money ends up being channeled through another activity. Now, so the players are vast. And also, we want to mention it that all those players are supposed to be part of the fight against these offenses of money laundering.
Talk about the curriculum.
Yeah, we also have a curriculum embedded in the Uganda Police Force. I mean, we call it a module. Um, for all teachings or all trainings in Uganda Police Force, professional courses, we have now gone that distance. We have inculcated the teachings on money laundering in our curriculum.
The intention?
Yeah, to make sure, our intention is to ensure that we equip our officers with the skills and the abilities to tackle these emerging crimes. They are sophisticated, they need some level of information and skills.